For the next few weeks, I think, we'll be talking about faith, prayer, and the dangers of pride. And we're going to start with the 36th chapter of the book of Isaiah, which lots of people see as a bridge between the three parts of Isaiah. Hezekiah is the lead character in this part of Isaiah. Apart from David and Solomon, no other king gets as much play, as much time, as much mention as Hezekiah does. And so we're looking tonight at the time of Hezekiah's reign and some of the things that happened in that time. He did some good stuff where the kingdom had lost their way. They had come to a place where they were inclined to worship idols and even to bring idols into the temple. They had come to a time where the Hebrew people would find themselves joining idol worshipers in the so-called high places in the hills where they had built temples to idols, and they didn't have a problem with that kind of worship. Hezekiah came along and represented a return to the kind of integrity that had preceded him, and he came in a time when there was crisis. And one reason we turn to this part of the Bible right now is the sense that we are in the midst right now of a world crisis. In the 1600s, when the Pamunkeys and the Mattaponi and the Estrumas and the Navajo and who else? Sioux and other nations occupied the land between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. And when people from South and Central America, in days when there were no walls, allowed, because there were no walls up at Jamestown, there was no wall at Plymouth Rock, there was no wall. You can't block immigrants from coming in if you don't have a wall. If you don't have a wall, you can't have a country. And if immigrants come in and they bum rush the indigenous people who often kindly welcome them, and next thing you know, the immigrants take over. It's happened before. When all those nations that I listed before occupied the land between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, when the immigrants came in, they changed the name, started calling it something else, and took the rights that the indigenous people had to their land and began to establish borders and draw lines that before hadn't existed, to make rules for how the indigenous people were going to live on their own land. Lots of people call it colonialism. Matter of fact, when the immigrants came to the land between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, they called the places that they established colonies. And they had different colonies occupied by different people from different parts of Europe from time to time. Lots of Scottish people occupied what's now West Virginia, and lots of people who came from prisons in Europe, debtors' prisons, occupied what is now Georgia, and they live in that part of the land between the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. Before it was united, and before it was nations, and before there were states. When it was occupied by those people, the immigrants came in and changed everything, and the immigrants took over. Now, this many years later, the people who were immigrants when they got here no longer call the indigenous people the originals, but they act like the immigrants are the indigenous people and do everything they can to keep immigrants out. And they don't have a problem with that. They don't see any hypocrisy in that. They don't see anything wrong with that. But it's not different than what was happening in the world in the 700 BC, 700 years before the birth of Christ. It was like that for Israel and Judah and Babylon and Assyria, and the way the nations lived together in the same place. And so there was this crisis. And the crisis was a problem where people put their trust in the wrong places. They put their trust in treaties instead of God. They put their trust in treasures instead of God. They thought that they could buy whatever they needed to make peace. And Isaiah records the story in these chapters that we're going to look at, and we're going to see what we can learn from their lessons about prayer and faith and the dangers of pride. So where my designated reader, if you would read the first 10 verses.
Verse 10? Okay. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Sennacherib,
right,
king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. Then the king of Assyria sent his field commander with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. When the commander stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field, Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna, the secretary, and Jonah, son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to him. The field commander said to them, "Tell Hezekiah, this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing this confidence of yours? You say you have strategy and military strength, but you speak only empty words. On whom are you dependent that you rebel against me? Look now, you are dependent on Egypt, that splintered reed of a shaft, which pierces a man's hand and wounds him if he leans on it. Such is Pharaoh's king of Egypt to all who depend on him. And if you say to me, we are dependent on the Lord our God, isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar? Come now, make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses if you can put riders on them. How then can you repulse one officer of the least of my master's officials, even though you are dependent on Egypt for chariots and horsemen? Furthermore, have I come to attack and destroy this land without the Lord? The Lord himself told me to march against this country and destroy it.
The crisis, it sounds like a crisis of faith and a problem where a whole lot of trash is being talked by the field commander. He insults God and insults the nation Israel and tries to overcome them by intimidation. It's not far from the kinds of conversations that we hear these days when intimidation seems to be the main tool, or distraction the main weapon for keeping people from believing that they can be who God says they are. And so if you have people telling you what you can't do and why you can't do it, it's like walking into saying all your schools are bad, your neighborhoods are bad, you don't have any jobs. What do you have to lose by betting on me? It's distraction, it's intimidation, it's changing the focus of the people who would hear from trusting in who they should trust in to trusting in someone who is completely untrustworthy. He's not the king, but he comes to speak on behalf of the king. And he says to the people, you think Egypt is going to help you? Egypt can't help you. You think Democrats are going to help you? Democrats going to help you. They're weak. He says Egypt is a splinter of a nation. They're not even strong enough to stand up on their own spears. They can't help you. Is not your God, the God who was evicted from the high places by Hezekiah? Now he's selecting all gods and is assaulting all gods, false gods, as though he could speak on behalf of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and denounces him as powerless, so as to call focus away from all the things that we hold dear as objects of our faith. So what's the biggest crisis you think we face in this country today? A lot of them? A big one. What is a big one? You say the president is crisis. It's a crisis. Yeah. That presidency is the mark of a crisis. As you say that, he is like the field general for the devil himself, as he stands out and he says before all the people who trust God that you'll never win. Just trust me. So in that way, he is like, he sounds just like this general. You were going to say, Deacon Stokely? I don't think it's all. Your microphone isn't on anymore.
Oh, excuse me. Well, the crisis that we really face is fear. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it comes from fear, because if you get fear in a person and thinking that they can't make it or no hope, mm-hmm. you do a greater damage to them than anything, because when you start telling them that they are worthless and they ain't gonna make it. Yeah. So I think fear is one of the greatest crises we have right now in this nation.
Yeah. You can't win. Yes, Mary.
I think a rise in hatred and division, because mm-hmm. when man is unified, they can do just about anything. Mm-hmm. But if you can divide them and get them turned against mm-hmm. each other, mm-hmm. that's when a lot of problems mm-hmm. start.
And I really think when our independence, our ability, our freedom mm-hmm. to speak, because once you lose your freedom to speak, or you have the drawback spirit, mm-hmm. or the drawback spirit of intimidation, because you're afraid to say, mm-hmm. so you enter into this tribalhood place of not saying what you really want to say.
Yeah. It's true that and we know that we say it all the time, but we just say it like it's just something to say. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. So we forget that it's not just, that's what I mean by getting the Bible out of the book. You got to stop just reading it and start believing it and recognize it. We say that most of the people in the room can recite that verse, but we don't think of it when we think of who we're looking at, who we see instead of who we're looking at. So the notion, how many people voted? What percentage of people didn't vote in the election in 2016? I think it's 48% of the eligible voters didn't vote. Huh? Yeah. And if I may say so, irresponsibility. We really think that we value the separation of church and state, I like to say always that the state can't tell the church what to do, but the church must tell the state what to do. One by one, we tell the state what to do. And part of our responsibility as stewards of what the freedom that God has given us, we say, whom the Son sets free is really free. Well, not really free from the penalties and the power of sin only, but really free to live an abundant life, free to have access to the rights and privileges and the responsibilities and duties that are ours to subdue the earth, to replenish the garden, to be fruitful and multiply. All of that is how you stop just reading and start working. Not just reading the word, working the word. Yes, sir.
When I voted for Obama the first time, I took my daughters.
I'm gonna ask you to use the microphone so that the people in the who are not present can hear you.
When I voted for Obama the first time he ran, me and my daughters, we were 18 and 19 years old, voted, and the line was around the corner. I voted with my daughters last election, and it was, you could walk in and vote 5 times you wanted to. That's how short the line was. Right. I think we have to, as in Christ and God, have excuse me, I'm new at this, but have faith in God to the point where you are sure of yourself and the persons that you respect as leaders, and also come together as a group of people who follow God all the time. And that's one thing that I notice that we don't do as much as we should. Again, I'm new at this, and I apologize if I said anything silly, but
faith is not simply for the possession of it. It's for the use of it. It's for the operation of your faith. Now that I have faith, what do I do? How do I exercise my faith? How do I demonstrate my faith? How do I use my faith to accomplish the will of God in the world? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was thinking about something, because back when this country started, it was so many people who believed. And so you had peer pressure to do what's right, and you had teaching to do what's right. And now we have had so many false prophets and voices that we actually had a whole slew of bad choices, and we didn't have the emotional maturity to think it through. And people just stayed home.
Right. The tendency to give up. It was, I was in New Jersey in 1989, 90, when the governor was elected. Christine Todd Whitman was elected governor. It was the first time I saw the voter suppression in action. And what they did was travel around the black churches and all around black communities, and they said all the time, Whitman will never win. She can't win the election. She'll never win. And instead of talking up whoever the other candidate was, they said that she could never win. She was the Republican candidate, and they said the Democratic candidate had it going hands down. And so people believed that they would win, the right person would win, even if they didn't vote, and so they stayed home. So it is a sense of apathy. It's a sense of not paying attention. It's a sense of listening, as Mary says, to the wrong voices. So if you do have 2 bad choices, you still got to make one. And if half the people who voted for Obama the first and second time trusted him, they would have followed his recommendation. When he said, this man is morally unacceptable to serve as president of this country. He knew some stuff we ain't know, and he knew some stuff he couldn't tell us. But it's unbelievable how much information people with enough security clearance know that they can't tell the rest of us. So if they give you advice, it's probably based on everything they know. which is far more than we know. But you don't have to trust Obama. That was not the problem for Israel. Their problem was they started trusting Hezekiah and forgot about trusting God. And as life went along and some things smoothed out for them, they came to be intimidated. By the time in this story, Judah, the kingdom's still divided. And they are on the verge of being overrun, despite that Jeremiah told them, Isaiah told them, Elijah told them. For hundreds of years, centuries, they'd been told that something bad gonna happen if y'all don't change your ways. So they didn't listen to the prophets, and exactly what was prophesied came to pass. Well, Hezekiah, to his credit, was faithful and was helpful at bringing the nation around. But God was using their circumstances to position them in the way they needed to be positioned in order to be in the right place at the right time. We've talked about that before in this setting, how when it seemed like Babylonian captivity, if it ever happened, would be the worst thing that could happen to them. The fact of the matter is, Babylonian captivity was the place where God kept them safe. So had they not been where they were in captivity, they would have been destroyed one way or another. Only because they didn't listen when God said, listen and change your ways. So maybe in his talk with them, as we'll read some more of this, make sure I'm saying what I want to say. Verse 7, but if you say to me, this is still the commander speaking, if you say to me, we are depending on the Lord our God, isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar? Here he throws some shade toward heaven. He's talking about God's inability to do what they're saying God can do. If you say to me you are depending on God, you can't depend on a God who has let you down in the ways that he's let you down. His problem is his theology is messed up because we're not talking about Diana. We're not talking about Mars. We're talking about the God of Abraham. We're not talking about Baal. We're talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're not talking about any God. We're not talking about local gods who every high place you go to, you get another God. We're not talking about that. But this field commander, like a lot of arrogant people, is misinformed and uninformed. So all he can see is his own strength. So at this point, we see the problem of his sense of self, his invincibility. He cannot be defeated. There's no army in the world that can defeat him. So he thinks Egypt is too helpless and Israel is too timid. So he wants them to give up, and so he threatens them. I like verse 8. Come on now. He doesn't really say, come on now. He says, come now. But if he was saying it today, he would say, come on now. Make a bargain with the master, the king, with the real king, the best king, the strong king, the king of Assyria. And then he offers, what do you call it, tribute for their faithfulness, their allegiance. That sound familiar? This happened to Jesus. I'll give you all these kingdoms if you just bow down. So when you see the same threat time after time, it ought to just somehow click in your mind, I've seen this trick before. So it's the same trick and the same trickster. So if it happened 700 years before Christ, it happens in the first century, why are you surprised that it happens in the 21st century? It's the same trick and the same trickster. A treaty won't save you. A deal, you could have you could have Richard Hillian making deals. Richard calls himself the deal maker. You could have Richard Hillian making deals. But because our main opposition is who he is, we can't put trust in someone who's not stronger than everybody else we know. What are you thinking, Reverend?
The same.
The what?
I was thinking about the same trickster, the same identical trickster that was there 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's the same identical trickster that's here now. Mm-hmm. Back to your scripture that you were saying earlier, we could really get in our mind that we wrestle not with flesh and blood.
Right.
Because I was thinking about Flip Wilson many years ago.
The devil made me do it?
The devil made me do it. And he was saying it then, speaking about how what we do, we respond to things that's presented to us in the spiritual realm, mm-hmm. and not even being aware that the devil is like sometimes controlling us as a puppet string. Mm-hmm. You know, because the devil made me do it. And that's why we wrestle with that flesh and blood. That's what I was thinking.
Well, some people wrestle and some just give up the fight.
Yeah.
The problem is when you give up the fight and you don't wrestle. If you keep moving, I mean, you could get out the grip, but if you just lay there, he'll hold you and make you think you like it and make you think it's good for you. Yes,
see,
ma'am.
that's what I'm getting to, because I think we've been seduced for a couple of generations, and we don't even know we're in a fight. Mm-hmm. We have been chasing material things and self-interest, even to the point where we're not raising our own children. Mm-hmm. We're letting the school do it. Mm-hmm. We've abdicated our authority in the earth.
Right.
And we don't even recognize that false voice when it's talking.
Right.
We're agreeing with the false voice, and only when it starts cussing at the microphone do we recognize this man might be crazy. Mm-hmm. We knew he was crazy before he got elected.
Yep. Well, having spent as much time in New Jersey as I have, I knew he was crazy 25 years ago. It's the same man, and it's the same man because his motive and his motivator are now who they were then. And so, if the devil comes to steal and kill and destroy, and a man with orange hair comes to say, I came to steal and kill and destroy, that's what he's done. He's stolen. He steals money every time he goes to his own resort and pays himself for staying at his own house. That's theft. He steals every time he invites somebody else to stay from some other country in his place in return or exchange for some favor that he gains in that country. That's theft. Okay, so we know he comes to steal. I say he comes to kill. He wanted to kill Assad. Yeah, let's go kill him. In his 3rd month in office, his solution to the crisis in the Middle East was annihilation. Or he would blow South Korea up, or North Korea up, as though no fallout would come upon South Korea. He wants to kill. Killing is in his mentality. He wants to destroy. He works daily to create division between races and cultures, and is trying now to preserve the ability to continue to do that far into the future. If he comes to steal, to kill, and destroy, who is he? Yeah. Yeah. So your works follow you. His works follow him. So it's like opening your eyes to know that it's a spirit. Yes, Mary.
I keep getting encouraged though, because we know nobody comes into power unless God lets him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some things I think he has done, even though it wasn't, I don't think, his idea, what he did for Israel. You think the Lord just let him be in place for a minute? And if we ain't got to the part where Hezekiah started praying, but Trump ain't the last storm. He ain't the last story.
Now, I think that's the importance of Hezekiah not being faked out to the point that he didn't trust God, even though it looked bad, even when you can't see it, even when you don't know how it's going to all work out. If you really trust him, you know that somehow it's going to work out. You don't know how. You don't know when. You don't know what this rough patch means. What is he doing in here? I sometimes ask God the question, what are you up to? Why am I going through this like this? What are you working on? Let me know. Of course, that's not part of the deal. And the reply, the unspoken reply, is just trust me. I got this. I've been God a long time. Yes, Reverend.
When we look closely at it, and we are in a difficult place, the saying is, where God turns every bad situation into good, not necessarily meaning that's the way he wanted it to go. But our choices that we make are bad choices, and then he gets in there, and it might take today or tomorrow next year for it to make it to his good. But that's not necessarily, he did not want us to go that path.
That's verse 10. Furthermore, have I come to attack and destroy this land without the Lord? The Lord himself told me to march against this country and destroy it. So at this point, it's hard to accept the fact that God is working on something. And in order for the project to be finished, you got to go through some stuff. It's hard to accept that comfortably. That he's working on something and he's using me somehow to do something, and I don't know what it is, and I don't really like the fact that I'm the one. You know, how come? Lord, use Job. Consider your servant Job. Don't consider me. Consider another servant. Yeah, work with somebody else. He says, y'all help me. So say what? So that's the thing. We don't get to see the end from the beginning. All we get to see is back there and right now. And when we look back there, what we remember is what he has done already. So we know what he can do. Do you believe that it's true that all things work together for the good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose? Do you believe that, or you just say that? Because, go ahead, Mary. I know I stepped on your text.
I don't think it's that simple, because if I'm Hezekiah and I done a cleanup job for God, then I'm not expecting him to send this guy, and I think God did send him just so he could show off. But I'm not expecting that. And you start questioning yourself, going, what did I do, and where did I go wrong, and all these stuff that plays in our human minds. It ain't as quick as you say it is, Pastor. But if you look back, you don't always see the bad stuff after God done healed you. You see the good stuff. And you forget all the stuff he dug you out of, like you said.
Well, if you say what? Yeah.
Well, I don't remember everything bad that hurt. I mean, I done had some bad stuff, but I don't remember the details of it. I remember where I'm at, and I'm healed, and I'm saved, and this is paid off, and I remember all those things. I don't remember the thought processes and the hell, because he healed me. I really don't remember all that hell. You know?
Well, and you don't have to, because you have a record of his work. And if you forget, it is written. And every now and then you hear somebody testify of what he did yesterday. And when you hear, that's why our witness to each other is important. When you hear of what he's done in the life or is doing in the life of someone else, it encourages me when I consider how long I've been waiting for what I've been waiting for, because I know that he's still blessing. He's been blessing, and he's still blessing. And that's where a text like the Romans text I have to use that to nurture my ailing spirit when I'm feeling like I've been trumped. Then I remind myself that everything is working. Yeah. And in the end, it's going to turn out like in my favor. Yeah, huh? Yeah.
So that's the main thing right there, the God's favor over our lives, even though the situation we are in. That favor of God is so important, 'cause that grace covers everything that we cannot cover. Anywhere in the world we can look in our future and tell what's going on. And because you think about all the things that is going on in our lives right today, right this second, or this minute, or this hour, we'll never really understand all that. But that's that favor of God that gives us that rest and assurance, that hope, knowing that he's there every step of the way. Because the children of Israel, all the things they did with disobedience to him are many years. He couldn't gave up on him a long time ago. And even for us right now, he still didn't give up on this nation, but we still disobedient in things that we does.
Yep.
So it's just the favor of God.
Yeah. I could have grown up in the Sudan and been there. Huh? I could have grown up in the Sudan. She said Sudan. Right now, instead of being in the 21st century in the Sudan, I could have, in the United States, I could have been in the 21st century in the Sudan. But during the Middle Passage, when my ancestors were jumping off the boat, jumping in the ocean, they couldn't see this. They couldn't see here and now. They couldn't see that what I was being saved from, when they were being beaten and lashed and lynched. They couldn't see now. but somehow I brought my genetic signature with me, and so I benefit from everything that they put in me over the centuries, and somehow, if I believe that he's got a plan in mind, and that he really holds the future and holds the world in his hands, I can make it, even though somebody's telling me now it's the Lord's will that I'm going through what I'm going through, and that they are the agents of God come to foist that upon me. What I say, Reverend, that made you jump out of your seat?
So what that brings into play is the word that my brother said earlier about faith. Because if we operated in the place of, even though I don't get to benefit from it, I know he will, I know he can. I know he's able, even though I'm still going to experience what I'm experiencing, and I won't get out. My DNA shows me that my ancestors had the faith to endure because a better tomorrow is here. Not for them, but for us. So faith is if we could grasp hold of, and many times we think that God is able, so God is going to do it for me. You know, we look for God to do it for me. And when God don't do it for me, God, are you still there? And we question it when he does not do it for me.
On our schedule.
On our schedule.
Yeah. See, I see you, Carl. Come close where you can get a microphone.
The Bible gives a definition of faith. Faith is something things hoped for, and the evidence of things unseen.
Right.
And if we just believe, the word hope is in there. Justice Jackson used to preach about hope all the time.
Right.
We need hope in this day and time.
Yeah. Obama talked about the audacity of hope. You have the nerve to hope that things are going to be better, in spite of the way things are in the present.
But Pastor, the emphasis of what, and I just turned to what he says, so you know the Holy Ghost is happy. But it's the evidence of things not seen.
Right.
So why we want to flip the script and say we got to see it?
Because we were living in myself.
That's right. It ain't operating in faith if we got to see it. It's the evidence of things not seen. Generational faith.
Right.
You're never going to see.
Right. And that's, I don't, as a rule, I don't like proof texting, you know. But when I say I want us to remember what we know. What we know is that a time will come when a trumpet will sound, and the dead in will win. Yeah. So I got some. So my daddy, if he comes before I die, will get up before me. But myself, because this ain't me. It just looks like me, so that you can distinguish between me and him. So he had to make me look different than him, so that when you need me, want me, talking to me, you don't end up talking to the wrong person. But the truth of the matter is, what he and I look like is nothing. You can't see me. You just see this. And I thank God that this is so much better than me. because I have so many issues with me. Yes.
One thing that I'm gonna kind of understand is that I came here to this wonderful church, and I see things now that I didn't see before in me. So, is it okay to see things that are good through God?
If your eyes were not opened, then I would say that we missed our assignment.
Okay. No, they are opened.
My
That's what I'm
prayers,
saying.
I'm taking your word for it.
Yes, they are open. And I was just, you can see some things through faith. It's okay. Is it okay to see things that are working for you now that worked before? And I'm just making sure, I mean, being here today and being here the last Sunday has brightened my eyes about a lot of things. And I'm just making sure it's okay to see the good things also in faith.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not trying to scold anybody. I'm trying to learn. 'Cause I'm learning a lot by being here.
Good. That's why we call it study, so we can learn things. I like what Mary just did with the unseen, because it's not just a word for what the things that are unseen, because that might make you think that I'm talking about some event between now and 10 o'clock. But I could be talking about a thing that I don't live long enough to see. I may not live long enough to see it. I may never get to see it. But just because it's like the fiery furnace experience. We know you the king and all that, and hope you live forever. But just want you to know that our God can deliver us. But if he don't, then he's still going to be our God, and we're not going to bow down to you. So the problem in Israel's present is the enemy who comes in to antagonize them and to terrorize them and to threaten them and to challenge their faith, challenge them not to believe that they can still trust this God, whom they say who they say is going to come see about them. So then Eliakim, Shebna, and Joah said to the field commander, "Please speak to your servants in Aramaic, since we understand it. Don't speak to us in Hebrew in the hearing of the people on the wall." They're concerned. How does King James say that? Then said Eliakim and Shebna and Joah to Rabshakeh. It's not a name, it's the title. That's where the other Bible translates it into the field commander. "Speak, I pray thee, unto thy servants in the Syrian language," that's Aramaic, "for we understand that, and don't speak to us in the Jews' language in the ears of the people that are on the wall." That's interesting. They don't want everybody to hear. They don't want everybody to know.
You can't trust God's people if they hurt.
That's what it sounds like. That the commander replies, was it only to your master and you that my master sent me to say these things, and not to the people sitting on the wall, to all the rest of y'all? That they may eat their own dung and drink their own piss with you? That's the King James. That's the NIV says, King James says, "Well, not." The commander replied, "Was it only to your master and to you that my master sent me with these sayings, and not to the people sitting on the wall, who, like you, will have to eat their own excrement and drink their own urine?" That sounds much less crass, doesn't it? Y'all like the King James Version. I'm just reading it. I didn't write it or translate it. So don't let everybody know. If you let everybody know what you're going to do to us, all the people will be scared. And if all the people are scared, then chaos breaks out, and we have a real crisis. So that if you hide the information from the people, they won't be aware of impending danger. So you keep it from them. Don't tell them that there's a storm out on the ocean. But the commander replied, was it only, then the commander stood at verse 13 and called out in Hebrew. Now the ladies in the booth are hesitant to put the King James up. Now they don't know what goes on. Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language and said, hear ye the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, the Lord will surely deliver us. This city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria. Man, that's pride for you. He is in a battle with God, and is talking this kind of trash. That's the danger of pride. Make an agreement with me by a present, and come out to me, and eat ye every one of his vine, and drink one of his fig tree, and drink ye every one of the waters of his own cistern. So if you just turn yourself in, if you just abandon this foolish notion of fighting, if you just cooperate with your opposition, if you just surrender to your enemy, if you just say, you're right, we can't win, we're not strong enough, God won't come to our rescue, and you just give in, then you'll be happy. That's what he says. He says that's the secret to joy. The secret to happiness is giving in, giving up. And regrettably, by changing the appearance of what's valuable in our eyes, we find ourselves all the time tempted to drink the Kool-Aid. End up on the wrong side. How far did I go? That was 16? Okay, and 17 should have gone together. Drink from your own cistern until I come and take you to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards. Oh yeah, that's right. It's going to be wonderful. Follow me. Put these chains on your way. And everybody hold on to the shackles. And it's going to be a little rough getting there, but when you get there, where I'm taking you to is going to be to a land just like your own. You'll be happy there. You'll be happy in captivity. You'll be satisfied when you get where we're going.
But Pastor,
yes, dear.
I think sometimes we lose our individual accountability because we all have individually compromised and taken shortcuts and chased after the money and the pleasures without paying the dues and getting some maturity. And so the country is just a reflection of all the individual compromises.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's why I sent you that note yesterday about putting our hashtag on our website and on Facebook. I don't want to be relentless in worship. That'd be nice. But we learned last Friday, watching Aretha Franklin's funeral, that relentless worship don't work. Well, they stayed in for 8 hours, and by the time they got to, by the time when it started, you couldn't get a seat. By the time they got to the end, you could have sat anywhere you wanted to, and you could have sat in Jasper's seat and made a lot of people happy. That's the only bad sermon I ever heard Jasper Williams preach. So relentless church is not the thing. It's responsibility. And when I challenge Olive Grove to become more responsible, both individually and collectively, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being responsible for what we see, responsible for what we say, responsible for what we do, responsible in every way, responsible for our own growth and development as individuals and as a body of Christ, responsible for our neighborhood, responsible for our community, responsible for our country and in our country, responsible to each other and responsible for each other. That's what I'm talking about. And I think that's the way we have lost our way, so to speak.